Today's daf is Masechta Chullin Daf Chav Bab, and we will begin daf Chav Hey Amid Beis by the Mishnah, and we're discussing what's called temed. So here we go. Here's a picture of temed, which is basically water that's on top of wine sediment, as he sees grape seeds and wine sediment at the bottom. The question is, what is this water? Is it water or wine? And there's a very big difference if you call it water or wine. If you call it water, okay. So water, you cannot purchase water with Ma'aser Sheni money, and you and also it could passel a mikvah. In other words, if you have a mikvah that's only, let's say, a little bit below 40 saw, and this water falls into it, it passels the mikvah because it's she'uvim water, right? Not natural water, but she'uvim water. It's not rainwater. Okay, so we don't know. If you call it water, you can't buy it with Ma'aser Sheni money. It could passel a mikvah. But if you call it wine, because it's mixed with wine, imagine the water. My mother used to make the orange juice with the concentrate. So if you call it that water before you mix it, I guess, wine, then you could buy it with Ma'aser Sheni money, because Ma'aser Sheni money, you're supposed to only use it for food, and it will not passel a mikvah, because only water could passel a mikvah, not wine. So the Mishnah is going to make a difference. Before fermentation, it's like water. After fermentation, this water comes fermented, so then it's like wine. That's the Mishnah. Hatemed achlei hichmitz. Here we go. Hatemed achlei hichmitz, until it becomes fermented. Eina nikach b'kesef meiser. You can't buy it with Ma'aser Sheni money because it's water. Upaisel is a mikvah and disqualifies a mikvah if it's less than 30 saw. If it's less than 40 saw and it falls into a mikvah, it could disqualify a mikvah because it's has a din of water. But once this temed becomes fermented, so now it has somewhat of a good taste of wine. So there, nikach b'kesef meiser. So you could buy it with Ma'aser Sheni money because it has a din like wine, and upaisel as eina paisel as a mikvah, it doesn't disqualify a mikvah. Why? Because wine does not disqualify a mikvah. Now the Mishnah discusses another idea. Ha'achen, brothers that inherited from their father, and they divided up their assets, and then they just keep it together. Everybody knows, each brother knows which assets is theirs, but they just keep it in the common trust for time being. So they're like shutfin, they're like partners. And therefore, at that time, they are chayev in a kalban. If they take, let's say, if they would take off a machzas a shekel to donate a machzas a shekel, if you're donating on behalf of yourself, you have to add a kalboin, an extra kalboin, just in case you didn't get the coin right. Chazal, some coins were rubbed out, so Chazal said that when you give machzas shekel, give a kalban more. So if they give a shekel from the trust, they have to give two kalboins, right? But Peturim and Ma'aser Behema. But at that point, they're exempt from Ma'aser Behema, because the Ma'aser Behema is only if there's a one owner who has a bunch of animals, then he's chayiv in Ma'aser Behema. If you have a partnership that owns animals, so then it's potter from Ma'aser Behema. Fine. But when they are obligated Ma'aser Behema, when our brothers like not partners, and they're actually just considered one unit, is before they had a chance to divide up the assets. The father just died, so they're still not partners, but they're still considered like one unit. So then they're chayev a Ma'aser Behema. But at that time, peturim min al kalboin. Then when they give a shekel from that assets, they're exempt from the kalboin, because when you give on behalf of somebody else, let's say a father gives a machzas a shekel on behalf of his son, or a person gives machzas a shekel on behalf of a poor person. Chazal said you don't have to give the kalboin. So here they don't really own; they didn't divide up the assets of the father. So it's really the assets still belong to the father, and therefore, when they give machzis a shekel, they're exempt from the kalboy. Okay, so that ends that part of the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara goes back to that temed. This temed was this wine and water and concentrated grape seeds. So, Mani Masnisin, who's the author of our Mishnah? Loi Rabbi Yehuda, Loi Rabbanan. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbanan. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Ham Samed, V'nosamayim b'mida, someone who's making temed, right? And he puts in water. So he put in water, like in enough water, and umatza kedemit dasa, and then he poured the water out, and it's the exact same amount of water that he put in. So potter. So then you are potter from meiser. Why? Because it's water. It's not wine. It's not and therefore you're potter from meiser. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda says you're obligated to meiser. It turned into wine. So wait a second. Rabbi Yehuda says money. Who's the author of our Mishnah? Rabbanan always says afagav the hechmetz. It seems that the Rabbanan always say that even if the water fermented, it's still not wine. So according to Rabbanan, even if this water over here fermented, it's still not considered wine. And Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to say our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, afagav the loy hechmetz. Rabbi Yehuda says even before it fermented, it's considered wine. Okay, so who's this author of our Mishnah? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avua. Rav Nachman said that we go to Amar Aleph. B'shehechmetz machlokes, when that really is, there's words missing in the brisa, and the machlokes is only when it became fermented. Where Rabbi Yehuda says it has a din of wine, and like our Mishnah, and only when it ferments it has a din of wine. And the Rabbanan says that even after it ferments, it doesn't. It's still water. Now, but if it did not ferment, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that it's water. It's not wine. When it became fermented, that is the machlokes. Okay, so that's the author of our Mishnah. The Gemara is going to say, goes off on a little thing, a little statement. Rav Nachman said another idea. Tamed, shalachu b'kasa meiser. When you buy, let's say you bought a piece of meat with your meiser sheni money, so the sellers gets this money, right? And that money is not meiser sheni holiness anymore. The holiness goes on to the piece of meat that the person bought. So that's how meiser sheni works. When you give the money, it loses its kedusha, it goes to the food. What happens? We just learned that temed, while before it ferments, it has a din of water, right? Temed, before it ferments, it's water. What happens? Temed shalakhu b'kesav meiser. When you bought it, it was unfermented. So a guy buys temed before it became fermented with meiser sheni money, ulbsoiv hechmetz, and then it fermented in the seller's possession, in the buyer's possession. So therefore, kana meiser, the kana meiser, really you shouldn't do that. You really should buy wine. But if you bought something that turned into wine, so then the kedusha of the sellers of the meiser sheni money goes on, transfers on to the temed. Okay, even though when you purchased it, it was water, but it ended up turning into wine. So therefore, kana meiser, it's a good sale, and the seller has this money, it's not kedushadik, and the buyer has this temed, which is now fermented, that has kedusha's meiser sheni. My timer, what's the reason? Simple. Igloi most afraid the peru. Now we know it was wine, it was a fruit. So now says the Gemara, but alamas. So this Rav Nachman seems to imply that even before something ferments, it has a din of. But I know it's going to ferment. It has a din of wine even prior to its fermenting. But elamas nisan, our Mishnah the Ketani that says hechmetz and loy hechmetz loy, our Mishnah says that only when it ferments it turns into wine. But if it did not ferment, it's not wine; it's water. So why? Maybe if I would have left it out, it would have turned into wine. It would have fermented. So why does our Mishnah say, as long as it didn't ferment, it has a din of water? Why? It's eventually going to ferment. So right now, it should be considered to be wine, because it should be considered as if it fermented. Rabba said, right. Our Mishnah is talking about a special type of mead. When the seller left some of the temed in a cup, he didn't sell. And that turned out that they didn't ferment. So now the seller knows that what he sold will never ferment. For some reason, it's not going to ferment. So now if it's not going to ferment, so that's what our Mishnah is discussing. Our Mishnah is discussing where we know for a fact if it's not going to ferment, then it has a din of water. But if you buy something and like most temed, it will ferment, then even before it fermented, it's considered wine. So that's the chiddush, that even prior to its fermenting, as long as you know that this temed is going to turn fermented, then it has a din of wine prior. Rava says, Hamani Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that you look at that even if something will ferment, you always look at it what it's now. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, if it looks like water and it tastes like water, so then it's water. That's it. I know for a fact it's going to ferment. That's our Mishnah we don't, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rav Nachman has a Tana on his side, which is the Tana Kama. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, which Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri are we talking about? The Tana we learned in the Mishnah, Gimel Lugimayim Chaser Kutav Nishnrafal Aseicha Kartav Yain, Umar Eyan Kamara Yain. Let's say you have this case over here. Here's my temed, which is water. Here is a little, you have to have 3 lugin of water to passel a mikvah, right? Of she'uvim. Let's say you have just under 3 lugin, right? And instead of 3 lugin, you filled it with a drop of wine. And it looks like wine. I colored it in a little bit so to make it look like wine. Even if you color it in to look like wine, but it's mostly water, and you don't have really wine, you don't have really water here. It's like 2.9 of water and 0.1 of wine. So the Mishnah like paslua, even if it looks like wine. But gimel lugim mayim chaser kurtev shenasel seicha chartev shalchalav umarei and kamara mayim v'nafla mikvah like paslula. Same idea. We go into this case. Let's say you have less than 3 lugin of water, and milk falls in, and it looks like milk. It looks like water. I'm sorry. It looks like water still. It will not pass a mikvah, because at the end of the day, physically, it doesn't have 3 lugin of water. So, but it's mashma. Let's say, in this case, if you had wine, and then if you had 3 lugin of water, and then you added a drop of wine, and it looks like wine, it will not pass a mikvah, because we'll treat it as wine, right? We'll treat it as wine. So that's what the Chachamim say. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, Rav Nachman will align himself according to the Tanakama. However, because even physically, and it looks like wine, right? It's physically, it's water. Physically, it's water. So that's that will be the shita of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, since it ended up turning into wine, so it's physically wine. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, I mean, no, you always look at it what it is right now. Hakol hoylech achar mara. Everything goes after the look. So if you have, let's say the second case, if you have less than 3 lugin of water and it has milk that makes it 3 lugin and it looks like water, and then they fall into the mikvah, so it's really water because it looks like water, even though it's not, physically 100% water, it's 99% water. It could pass a mikvah because Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, "Basa chazuse azlisne." So you always look at what it is. How does it look? Hachanami. So also in our Mishnah, Zul basa chazuse. Look at the look. The time of chazus ledahai ma'inine. As long as it doesn't ferment, and you taste it, and you look at it, it looks like water. So therefore, in our Mishnah, yes, I know this is going to ferment. You see, the water is going to ferment over here, but it looks like water. It tastes like water. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Ruru says, you look at the way it is right now, and therefore it has a din of water as long as it did not ferment. Next part, upligi de Rabbi Lazar. That is one view of that we just close the parentheses, and we go back to the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. What did the Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim have? A machlekes. If you make temed, is it water or is it wine? So one way was Rav Nachman's way. I think it was Rav Nachman's way, right? How to learn the machlekes. The machlekes is if it fermented, but if it did not ferment, even Rabbi Yehuda says it's water. Rabbi Lazar says, Dama Rabbi Lazar, Hakol moedim she'ein mafrishan leha l'mokom acha elam kem hechmitz. Only if it really turns into wine, then you could take off trumas and maasros. But kesavar b'loy hechmitz machlekes. The machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda already calls it wine even before it fermented. And therefore, our Mishnah is actually the Rabbanan, not Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda is so strict that he calls it wine even before it fermented. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, I'll call it wine, but it's not, and Yechayiv and Maasros, but it's only midrabanan. And therefore, you have to only take off trumas and maasros from itself, but you can't take off trumas and maasros of it on behalf of somebody else that's chayiv midaraisa, or something that's chayiv midaraisa on behalf of it. So that we don't allow, because that's also to do when you're trumas and maasros. You know, something that's chayiv midaraisa cannot be moitzi, something that's only chayiv midrabanan. But the bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda holds that even prior to it becoming fermented, it's already considered wine. Our Mishnah, according to Rabbi Lazar, goes according to the Tanakama that only after it ferments, it's wine, prior to its fermenting, and that's what the machlekes is. It's considered water. Tana Rabbanan, rabbis taught hatemed achlei hichmitz until it becomes fermented. Again, this temed that doesn't. Now, the question is it water or is it wine? So let's say it's water, right? Because it didn't ferment yet. Now, water could become tameh. So how do you mitayar water? Water that becomes tameh, you connect it to a mikvah, right? If you make a like somehow connect it, via a pipe to a mikvah, so then the water becomes tahar. So if it's prior to it fermenting, so it has a din of water, this tamid. So then, if you want to mitayar it, mashika b'mayim, then you can make hashaka and connect it to a mikvah. We got Amid Beis. When it's fermented, then it's wine already. So wine cannot become tar in a mikvah because wine cannot become part of the mikvah water. So ein mashika b'mayim. Amar Rava said, "Lo shanu ela shetimdim b'mayim tahorib v'nitmu aval tmeim yikara loy." It's the only time that this hashaka could work prior to its fermenting is if when you made the temed, it was made with pure water, right? Tahar water, and then later became tameh. But if it was tameh, if you used tameh water to make this temed, so even prior to its fermenting, you can't be mitayar it in a mikvah. So it doesn't make so much sense. Also, Rav Gvia Rav Gvia from Ksil said, Amr l'shmaitza kamid Ravashi. He said the teaching in front of Ravashi, and Ravashi is trying to understand this. Why do you say that if it's tamei from before, it doesn't help hashaka with a mikvah? Because I did the maya akire shachne tatoi uperi kafel meleel loiko salka leila hashaka lemaya. According to Ravashi, the picture is wrong. Because according to Ravashi, eventually the water goes to the bottom, the seeds float on top. When you connect it to the mikveh, it's only connected to the seeds, to the wine sediment. So therefore, hashaka is not gonna work. If that's the case, Ravashi says, then every time, even if you use pure waters and then it became tameh, hashaka should not work. Really, it does work because they do get mixed up. The wine and the water and the wine sediment gets mixed up, and therefore hashaka should work. It doesn't matter when the water was tamei or not. Bottom line is, temed, before it becomes fermented, has a din like water. Maybe not according to according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has a din like wine even then. But after it ferments, it has a din like wine. New Mishnah, new topic. Now, this topic is discussing a girl, right? A girl who is under bas mitzvah, who is a girl. According to we'll just read it clearly. Rab Meir says a girl from ages 3 till ages 12, a father can sell her as a shifcha. But during that time, if someone is ma'anas her, rapes her, or seduces her, there's no knas. When from 12 to 12 and a half, the father can't sell her, but if someone rapes her, she gets knas. So this girl changes halachas when she turns 12. According to the Chachamim, who disagree with our Mishnah, even a katana, 3-year-old girl, of course, the father could sell her, that's written in the Chumash, but even if someone would be ma'anas her or mafata her, rape her, there would still be a din of knas. Even though the Torah seems to say only by an hour there's knas, the Chachamim says it applies even by a katana. And therefore it overlaps, because from ages 3 to 12 and a half, they get knas. And from 12, you could already, there's no more sale. So, but for ages 3 to 12, there's sale plus there is knas. So let's read the Mishnah. Whenever you could sell a girl, that means up until 12 years old, ain't knas. But whenever she gets knas, which is when she's 12 to 12 and a half, ein mecha, the father cannot sell her. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, zu divrei Rameir. That is the opinion of Rameir. Chachamim says yesh knas bimkoim mechar, that sometimes there is knas at the same time you could sell a girl, because from ages 3, the Tanya we learned in a braysa, ketanu mibas yomi echad at shetavi beisaris yesh lo mecha ve'ein lo knas. Mishetavi beisaris at sheti boga yesh lo knas ve'ein lo mechar. Divrei Rameir. That's the opinion of Rameir. From 3 to 12, you could sell her, no knas. From 12 to 12 and a half, knas, father can't sell her. So Rameir oimer kol mokom sheyesh mecha ein knas v'kol mokom she'ein knas ein mecha. V'chachamim oimrim, chachamim say ketanim bas gimel shana b'yom echad ad sheti bogar, from 3 years old already, yesh lo knas. There is a knas. If someone rapes her, he has to pay a knas. And of course, the father can sell her. So the Gemara says, what do you mean, yesh la knas, knas and mecher loy? The father can't sell her when she's 3 years old? According to Chachamim, it overlaps. There's a time when the father could sell her, and also there is knas, and that is from ages 3 to 12. Very basic machlokes of is there knas by a katana. Next Mishnah, kol mokom sheyesh miyan ein chalitza. When a girl is under 12, she can do miyan. She can walk out of a marriage if she was brought into the marriage by her brother or mother. It's a marriage d'Rabbanan. Ein chalitza. At that age, she can't do chalitza because she's considered under bas mitzvah. The chol mokom sheyesh chalitza, but if she's over bas mitzvah, ein miyan, then she cannot do miyan. She needs a get. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, zu divrei Rameir. Sometimes she can do miyan even when she could do chalitza. In other words, according to the Chachamim, you could be 12 years old, so you're over bas mitzvah, so you do chalitza. But if 12-year-old could still do miyan if she was married by her brother and to another girl, to a girl who was married midrabanan, she could still do miyan up until she's 12 and a quarter, something like that. The Tanya, we learned to the Brisa, at Mosai Abbas Memenes, until how long can a girl do miyan? Until she's 12 years old. And she has to be a little bit more mature than that to have more straight black hairs. One more Mishnah. When they blow tekiyas, let's say, when they blow the horn, ein havdalah, you don't make havdalah. And the time that they do have havdalah, there's no blowing of the shofar. what the Mishnah is going to explain. For example, Yontiv Shecholias Bar Shabbos, like Yontiv that fell out on Erev Shabbos, that was this past Shavuos. So Toikin, they would blow the shofar on Friday. Why? Because on Erev Shabbos you were allowed to cook. On Shabbos you're not allowed to cook, so they blew the shofar. But Friday night when you make Kiddush, you don't make Havdalah in the Kiddush because you're going from Yom Tov into Shabbos. B'matzah Shabbos, but let's say Yom Tov falls out on a Sunday. So then if Yom Tov falls out on Sunday, then you mavdilim, you make Havdalah and in the Kiddush, the light toikin. And what kind of Havdalah you make? You're going into Yom Tov on Sunday. Kates and Mavdilim. So if you look in the Machzer, that's what it says. Hamavdil ben kodesh la kodesh. That's what you say. Ben kodesh chamer la kodesh chal. You're going from a severe kedusha to which is Shabbos to the lighter one, which is Yom Tov. Says the Gemara Hechet Tekeya. How would they blow? I know they blew on every Shabbos, but on Yom Tov that was going into Shabbos, right? Like this past, so they had to have a different type of blowing. Amar Rav Yehuda said tekiya umaria b'toichat tekiya. They blow a tekiya, and at the end of the tekiya, they lead into a trua. Ravasi Amar Rabasi says tekiya umaria. They blow, they take a pause, but it's still b'neshima achas, and then they do the trua, but it's still with one breath. Asking Rav Aseh b'hutzel kashmai say. In Hutzel, they used to have them like in the 5 times, they blow. So he made them blow when Yom Tov was going into Shabbos, like this past Shavuos, in Ravasi's town of Hutzel, they were Tekeo Maria with one blow. They first blew, then they made the trua, but the guy didn't take a breath in between. Meisvei, let's ask a question. Yom Tov Shcholias Bar Shabbos, Toikim V'lei Miriam. Our Mishnah says that they only blew a tekiah and not a trua when Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbos, which is this what Shavuos was, and you say you blow and make truas. My love, loy Maria and cloud. Does our Mishnah mean you don't do any trua at all? And it says the Gemara, loy. Rav Matar, Yehuda Matar Tamei, Rabbasim Matar Tamei. Yehuda Matar Tamei. Rav Yehuda explained the Mishnah, loy Mavriam B'fnei Atzma. They don't make a separate trua. El B'toichat Tekiya. In the Tekiya, and before they finish the Tekiya, they start already in trua. Ravasi Matar Tamei. That our Mishnah means loy Maria Mishtei Neshimas. You don't give 2 breaths. You blow tekiya, terua, but it still be in one breath with a small pause in between. Where do you say hamavda ben kodesh lekodesh? By the end of the bracha. You look in the siddur, it says hamavda ben kodesh lekodesh. Even when you start the bracha, you say hamavda ben kodesh lekodesh ben sheish yomim. That way. We don't pass like that. You only end off. So when Yom Tov is on Sunday and Matzah Shabbos, you're making Kiddush, so you say Hamavdil ben Kodesh Kodesh at the end of the bracha, not in the beginning of the bracha. You don't say ben Kodesh Cham le Kodesh Chal. Less Hilchas a Kavase. The halacha is not like him because you don't call something heavier and one lighter. And finally, Amrab Zera. Yom Tov Shecholias be'emtza Shabbos. Let's say Yom Tov finished on a Wednesday. Oimer, this is how you say the bracha. Hamavda ben kodesh chol ben oil kodesh ben yisrael la'amim ben yoim hashvi l'sheish shvei amasa. Now the question is, you're finishing the Yom Tov on a Wednesday, so why should you say it's the 7th day separated from the 6 days? But really, there's no 6 days. There's only 2 more days left to Shabbos. My tama, why do you make the bracha this way? Say the Havdalah Sumayna. It's the normal way to make Havdalah. We all the Havdalahs in the world, even though it really is not referring to the Havdalah of this particular Yom Tov, which ended on a Monday, on a Wednesday. Hadon Allah Akoil Shoichten. Okay, B'ez Hashem, we start the second parak tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay.